Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Illinois Arts Council Agency, and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Illinois Stories. I'm Mark McDonald in Decatur at the Rock Springs Nature Center, home of the Macon County Conservation District, where they're celebrating the 200th anniversary of the state of Illinois. And they're doing it in an interesting way by focusing on Macon County. And we're going to leave the nature part of this right now and go into the human culture part of this with Richie Wolf, who's the Nature Center manager. Richie, an interesting idea. I think a lot of local areas have done this in honor of the 200th anniversary. But Macon County, you took it on Macon County because you thought, okay, let's not only focus on Decatur, but let's focus on the history of the neighborhoods and the towns around Macon County. So it's a fascinating kind of exhibit.
Well, thank you. It took a team effort for us to put together, but we felt it was really important to honor Macon County and the citizens during this special bicentennial year. So we took different aspects of the county's history, combined it all and jumbled it together, and we come up with a pretty nice exhibit for the public.
Yeah, and we'll see throughout this exhibit too that you had a lot of help. The Macon County History Museum pitched in, Millikin pitched in, and some other groups pitched in, and they all you were able to bring a lot together, weren't you?
Certainly, it was a true team effort.
Yeah.
Our staff, of course, was instrumental, but we reached out to Millikin and the County History Museum because they have so many resources that we could bring in, and it's a great partnership.
Yeah, Macon County. Now, we're going to start here with Macon because Mr. Macon, oddly, who the county is named for, never lived here, did he?
That's true. He's from North Carolina, and he was named, the county was given his name because many of the settlers moved up from the south when they come to Illinois, and in 1829 is when the county was established, and he was quite a hero in the Revolution and served 37 years in Congress down there in the Carolinas. So a lot of the early settlers respected him a great deal, and they gave him the distinction of having a county named after him.
That's fascinating. A guy that never lived here, but he lives on though here, doesn't he?
6 different states have Macon counties named after this fellow.
The same guy?
So.
Well, let's move on over here because obviously you have some very famous citizens that lived here at one time. The most famous one, of course, was Abe Lincoln, his first home in Illinois was Macon County, wasn't it?
It sure was, actually just west of Decatur. Lincoln and his family, when Abe was 21, he came to Decatur in 1830, and they built a small log cabin over near Harristown, and he was only here a year because the winter was so severe. Him and his family continued on.
Yeah, that was the winter of the deep snow, which they called it, and people were buried. They were just buried. They couldn't get out at all. That was a terrible winter.
It was legendary, according to Lincoln himself.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was too much for him to take, so he moved on to New Salem and Springfield.
Yeah. And is it Richard Oglesby? Yeah, the Governor Oglesby. He was a good friend of Lincoln's, wasn't he?
He sure was. He also had a tough upbringing like Lincoln. He was actually an orphan at 8 years old down in Kentucky. But his uncle heard that Illinois was full of prosperity, so they moved up here and they established themselves right here in Decatur. And Richard had a fascinating life. I mean, he became a lawyer, and he went out to California for the gold rush. He was in the Army during the Civil War under U.S. Grant, and he became friends with the general. So later on, of course, he came back and became 3-time governor.
That's right, that's right. And his mansion that he built is still here. And in fact, the Conservation District owns that building.
It sure does, and it's still open to the public for tours.
Let's take a look at some of the pictures of this here. They're right over here. And these are some of the sample pictures of the mansion that he built and the way it looks today. It's a beautiful, beautiful building. And you use it for social functions, and it's really a museum, isn't it?
It really is, and we have a special board of directors that oversees it, but it is owned and operated by the Conservation District.
Let's move back over here to where we see U.S. Grant again, because there's an interesting tie-in between these men. U.S. Grant, of course, was chosen by Lincoln to head up his forces in the Civil War after several years of disappointing generals. But these three, their lives intersect a lot, don't they?
They do, really. I mean, if we look back into history, Oglesby, Lincoln, and Grant were quite good friends. Oglesby was actually the first one to mention Lincoln as the rail splitter candidate right here in Decatur.
Yeah, yeah.
They had a giant tent downtown Decatur, and that's where he was nominated as president.
Mm-hmm.
But once the Great War started, they still were intertangled. Oglesby served under U.S. Grant in the Civil War.
Yeah.
And then when Oglesby was actually injured pretty badly in a battle, and Grant assigned a doctor from Decatur to nurse Oglesby back to health and was credited with saving his life.
And his name was Dr. Silas Trowbridge, who was from Decatur and saved Oglesby's life.
Yes,
so
he was
would later
badly
become governor.
wounded.
Yeah.
And later on, many people may not know it, that Governor Oglesby was at Lincoln's bedside the day that he died.
No kidding.
He was such a close friend
Yeah.
that he was there, and he actually declined an invitation to the Ford's Theater to see the play that night.
Yeah.
So in that aspect, he was lucky he missed the actual
No
shooting.
kidding. But he was at Lincoln's bedside when he died. I didn't know that. Oglesby then married another local woman, only this one was from Logan County woman, where the Gillettes lived. And this is Anna right here, who married Richard Oglesby in 1859. They later built a mansion in Elkhart, which burned down, unfortunately. And then we have, this is another old piece of, not as old, but an old piece of Decatur, the Powers Grand Opera House, which unfortunately, as you can see, it met a very unfortunate demise. It must have been grand because it looks immense.
Yeah, speaking of fires, it was a very common occurrence for buildings in that era to be destroyed. I mean, this was built in 1889, and only 6 years later it was burned.
Mm-hmm.
They rebuilt it, but then it burned again in 1914.
Oh.
So Orlando Powers was one of the most influential citizens in Decatur during the glory years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Richie, we're looking at the oldest home in Macon County that's still on its original foundation. Some others have been moved, but this one is right where it has always been. And oddly, we're only like several hundred yards away from it here at the Rock Springs Nature Center. It's on your property here.
It sure is. It's on the national list of historic places. We call it the Trowball House. And those are named after two of the earliest owners of the property. We don't know who for sure built the place, but it was around 1840 when it was built. Mm-hmm. And the Trowball House is one of our facilities at the district, and we use it a lot for living history and historical interpretation. So kids and adults come and take tours of it. Even in the summer, it's open every weekend for free tours.
Mm-hmm. And you also have a heritage garden over there. And you have some volunteers that keep the old 1840s garden.
We sure do. The master gardeners here in Macon County actually maintain and take care of the heirloom garden, and all the fruits and vegetables are donated to local pantries in the fall. So it's a great team effort again.
Now let's take a look at this, because when a lot of people think of Decatur, they think of the transfer house, because it's been around as long as anybody can remember. It's been moved, but it stays in, I think it's in Central Park.
It's an iconic structure. It was built in 1895, and one of the neatest things, the person who designed it was named William Warren Boyington. And oddly enough, he designed many of the old buildings in Chicago, including the only building that's still standing after the Great Fire, the Water Tower.
Sure.
He designed that and the transfer house.
And so many of his wooden buildings they're gone.
Oh,
they're gone.
right.
But you can see, I mean, that he definitely had an eye for design.
Oh,
I mean,
it's an extravagant building, and this is on loan from the History Museum. But originally, it was built at the intersection of Main and Main, and people would actually come and buy their tickets. They'd board and unload from the streetcars that transferred people here in Decatur.
Yeah. And this was sort of like a rotary. There was a rotary around this, and the streetcars would come in. It was spokes of a wheel kind of, and they would all get off at the transfer house, and then they could catch their streetcar going the other direction. Yeah. Okay, now there's more to Macon County than just Decatur. And we're gonna get a real quick tour now. But these are some of the famous industrialists who came and made Decatur what it is. Hieronymus Mueller was somewhat of a genius. I mean, he invented cars, and he made these, but his bread and butter were these valves, and you know, for moving water and shutting water off and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. A lot of people may not understand that Decatur was a boom town after the Civil War. Once the trains intersected Illinois, they came right through Decatur, and this allowed goods from other parts of the states to be brought in, and more importantly, the agriculture could ship out their grains and products all over the country, and it really boosted the economy to the point where these gentlemen came and established businesses that many are still going today, including Mueller's.
Well, Mueller is, and so is Staley. It's not, Mr. Staley's not running it anymore. It's run by a big conglomerate, but it's still here, and it's a big employer and does a lot of business all over the world.
Well, A.E. Staley was instrumental, and still is, one of the founding fathers of Decatur, and created this huge empire from selling beans and corn, and that's why even today, Decatur is referred to as the soybean capital of the world, because all the tonnage that's processed through what's now Tate and Lyle.
Yeah, and Staley has some company too, because ADM has an immense plant here, and of course soybeans are a large part of what they do too.
Exactly. Their headquarters was moved out of Decatur recently, but it's still the largest ADM campus in the world is right here in Decatur, and it's going strong.
Yeah. Blue Mound. You know, I always wondered why Blue Mound was called Blue Mound, but you've got a picture here of the actual mound itself. This was sort of it was a kind of a freakish deal where one of the glacial movement stopped at some point, and this left a mound there. And I guess it was colored blue at some point. Somebody saw it as blue. But,
right, the blue color I don't know about, but if you can imagine this huge glacier, and as it melted, all the pebbles and rocks and gravel it collected as it traveled melted down a crevasse and formed a hill below it.
Okay.
And there are many of them in Macon County, but this one's the most prominent. It's the second highest elevation in the county.
No kidding.
And the Conservation District owns the property now. It's the best sled hill in the county.
Okay. And, you know, I've always heard of Black Bart, but I didn't know much about him, and I certainly didn't know he was from Illinois, and specifically Forsyth.
Well, there's so many characters in almost every town, but Forsyth produced kind of an infamous character. His name was Charles Bowles, and he actually was a farmer here in the county. Went to the Civil War, he was wounded while serving, and when he came back, he kind of got tired of the life, so what did he do? Moved out to California to mine for gold. Well, he got mixed results there, so he turned to what all bad boys do. Robbing stagecoaches.
And I guess he robbed a good number of them, enough of them that he got a real reputation, didn't he?
Well, he was documented getting 29 stagecoaches.
Well, that ought to make you a rich man.
But they did catch him, of course, like the long arm of the law does. He served 5 years in San Quentin for his crimes.
Notorious prison. Okay. And then I guess we don't know what happened to him after that. I guess he went straight because nobody kept track of him after that. Now, you know, there aren't many Hall of Famers from Macon County, but John Rotz was one of these. During the golden age of horse racing, you know, when Billy Shoemaker and all those guys were making a big name for themselves, John Rotz was about as good as they got. He won a number of the Triple Crown races, and he's from Warrensburg. He still lives there, huh?
Anybody can do anything. That's what I like to keep in mind. Even if you're from a tiny town, you can become great. And that's what John did.
Yeah. Amanda Pippett, it's hard to imagine Macon County's history without one of its major cultural institutions, which of course is Millikin University.
Right.
And you're on staff there as a librarian and archivist, so much of the history of Millikin University falls to you to sort of keep in order, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, I do get a lot of questions from people researching their family history that comes through Millikin, and also the history of the university from students and staff inside the institution as well.
Sure. And so when this history exhibit was being thought out, of course they came to you for some materials on Millikin.
Yes,
and you
of
were
course.
glad to give it to him, right?
Of course, we like to promote our institution in the community.
Sure, sure. One interesting thing, or many interesting things about Millikin's history, but one is that you have been the host of quite a few visiting presidents over the year. They've
Yes.
come to Decatur to visit Millikin University.
Yes, 3.
And it's a
and
great
from the very
honor.
beginning as well.
3 presidents.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, start us out at the beginning.
Okay, so the first sitting president to visit Millikin was Theodore Roosevelt in 1903. He came in June to dedicate the university, which was set to open for classes in September. So he came as part of a 66-day, 20-state train tour that he was on. He stopped at the Wabash Depot, yes, and they picked him up and brought him to the university. And here he is in the center, being escorted by local dignitaries, including our first Millikin University president, which is Albert Reynolds Taylor. And so he gave the dedicatory address for the university in June 1903.
What a great honor.
Yes.
What a great honor. Okay. It's kind of hard to get a heavyweight like that to come to your new university.
Right.
In a new university, now let's talk about Mr. Millikin just a little bit, because he was he wasn't a guy that liked to be out front much. In fact, we don't even have a photograph of him.
Well, we do have some photographs
some at the
of him,
university?
yes, we just don't have any in this
Oh, okay.
exhibit. He was a pretty modest individual, aside from giving his name to the university, but he was from a well-to-do family in Pennsylvania, and he left home around age 20 to make some money of his own by herding livestock on several tours to what was then considered the west of Pennsylvania. But he finally settled in Decatur in 1856 and founded his bank in 1860. But he had had sort of a lifelong dream of founding a university that would combine the scientific, the industrial, and the practical, along with the literary and the classical, which is a quote we use a lot, of course. So around 1899, yeah,
This is the iconic
he
look.
started developing the university, and this is our one of our most iconic buildings. It's today known as Schilling Hall, but back when it was first built, it was 3 separate buildings connected by a walkway on the lower level. So in the center was known as Liberal Arts Hall, and on the west end was the Engineering Hall, and on the east end, which is sort of cut out of the picture a little bit, was the Domestic Economy Hall.
Legend has it that there was a plaque going up on this tower that was going to have his name on it, and he said, "No, don't want my name on it."
Yes, he caught the stonemasons carving his name on the plaque on the what's now the clock tower there, and he said no, and so it said Schilling. It said Liberal Arts Hall instead.
Right. And this is another picture of Schilling Hall when it was being built. This would have been in 1902, I think,
Yes.
is the cornerstone.
Yes, 1902. This is about a year before Roosevelt came. The local masons and dignitaries came to install the cornerstone. And again, as part of Millikin's modesty, he didn't even want to be on the platform here.
Is that right?
With all the local dignitaries.
Look up here, and we've got, this is President Taft. He comes in February of 1911 to visit Decatur and makes sure he goes to Millikin University as well. About 1,000 people showed up to see him.
Yeah, Taft was our second sitting president to visit Millikin University. Our third, which we unfortunately didn't have a picture of for the exhibit, was Ronald Reagan, who visited Millikin in 1984 as part of an agribusiness forum.
And over here, we've got some odds and ends to look at. These are I always like looking at these old yearbooks. You know, I mean, there's from 1906, so that's like the 4th year of existence, right?
Right. Yeah, it was our 4th year of existence, but it's our first yearbook. The Millidex were published between 1906 and 1999. Unfortunately, we don't still have Millidex yearbooks, which is a bit unfortunate for me as an archivist when I'm trying to do research on the 2000s era.
Yeah. And then the school newspaper, which looks more like a magazine, was the Decaturian? Is that the way that's pronounced?
Yes, the Decaturian is still published to this day.
Is that right?
It's our student-written newspaper. But yes, the first 8 years of the newspaper were more of a magazine type format. It wasn't until around 1911 that they became more like a newspaper.
Yeah. Well, fascinating. Thank you, Amanda. Appreciate the visit.
Thank you.
Richie, if I'm not mistaken, the first black sheriff in Illinois was from Macon County, or was a Macon County sheriff.
Yeah, out of the entire state of Illinois. We had enough foresight to go ahead and elect Roger Walker back in 1998, and he was, yes, the first African-American sheriff in the entire state.
He'd been a member of the Sheriff's Department for 31 years. So he knew that department, didn't he?
He served his dues, that's for sure.
That's for sure. Okay. And the sheriff that Macon County presently has is an interesting story. And he may look familiar to some people because he's very well known, but Sheriff Howard Buffett, Warren Buffett's son, likes Macon County. He likes being sheriff. He's not going to run again apparently, but he likes being sheriff, and he's good to the county, isn't he?
He sure is. I mean, he's fulfilling a term of a retired sheriff's leader. So Howard is in there till the end of this term, which ends this fall. But he's done a lot of great things, including donating his own money from his foundation. He's helping out the Children's Museum of Illinois here in Decatur.
That's a fine museum too.
They're putting in a whole new wing that will be dedicated to the heroes, our law enforcement heroes. And then he's also built a whole new campus for law enforcement training right here in Decatur, and it's going to serve all the training for the whole state. Wow. People will be coming from all over Illinois, thanks to Howard here, to train on law enforcement.
Oh, good, good. Well, he has been a boon for Macon County, that's for sure. Now, another well-known sheriff, and this is the first Macon County sheriff. We don't have a picture of him, it's so long ago, but his name was William Warnock, and he held office from 1829 to 1835, and then again to 1842. He was an interesting guy because he owned a tavern, didn't he?
He sure did, way back. This is the beginning of Macon County, which was established in 1829. He was put into office, and he had a tavern, which was kind of convenient, I guess. Back in those times, there were so few people in the county that crime was really sparse. But we did find evidence that at one time he did have to arrest a couple horse thieves. And as a result of that, they did a public flogging in town square. And the sheriff actually received $3.50 for each flogging. So I guess that's good for him.
Maybe that was his favorite part of the job, who knows? I don't. But you know, interestingly, you know, back when Lincoln used to have to walk everywhere, and he lived along the Sangamon River. He's crossing the Sangamon River. Story has it he fell in, and he had frostbite so badly he had to recover at the sheriff's tavern.
That's right. Back in that severe winter of 31, he did fall through the ice and got a severe case of frostbite.
Yeah, we almost lost the most famous resident we
Can
ever
you
had.
believe
Can you
it?
imagine what history would have done if Abraham Lincoln hadn't lived through that ordeal?
Or if he even lost a foot or something as a result.
Yeah.
You know, everything
would
have changed.
Lake Decatur. This is interesting for many reasons. Back in around 1920, I think, the industry needed water. And actually, was it Staley himself who said, we got to do something about this?
That's right. Way back when A.E. Staley was running his business, he knew he needed water to process the corn and soybeans. So he actually approached city council at the time and basically demanded that we create a lake to supply his business this water. And back then it was 19 million gallons of water he required every day to operate.
Well, he wasn't going to be able to do that any other way. The Sangamon River wasn't going to provide that kind of water.
Not at all. In fact, he was so desperate that he threatened that he would move Staley's to Peoria if they didn't build this lake. So in 1923, he got his way. It was dedicated over the 4th of July week, and all sorts of parades and pageants and even swimming contests were held.
Guess who showed up? Guess who showed up? Now, the name Johnny Weissmuller may not mean a lot to young people, but to older people, remember him as Tarzan. He was the first Tarzan film, and he was, of course, a gold medalist in swimming, and that's how he got the role of Tarzan. So he was here to open up for the July 4th celebration, huh?
What a Hollywood star!
No kidding. And overall, a worldwide name, you know, for sure, with the Olympic gold medals. Now, I love this exhibit over here that you've got, Richie. We were talking about the transfer house. and how it was placed at the corner of Main and Main, and how the streetcars would access it and go around it. And this, tell me about this model. This was built locally, wasn't it?
It sure was. It's an interesting story because a fellow named Robert Shepard wanted to commemorate his wife and his anniversary. So he actually built this himself in 1992, and he depicted it as if the city would have looked in 1928, which was the year he got married.
Okay, so he built this for his wife, for his wife probably.
It's an end table or a dining,
Isn't that cool?
table for the living room,
Yeah.
and the buildings and the cars and the transfer house are as they appeared in Decatur in 1928.
Oh, that's priceless. And where does this live?
This lives at the History Museum here in Decatur. It's another one of the items that they loaned to us for this exhibit.
People got to see that.
And it still lights up.
Just the way he designed it. Richie, you can't really visit this building without seeing this nature center that you've got, this panoramic window that shows the birds feeding. And this is a great time of year. What are we looking at on feeder number 1 there?
Feeder number 1 has a downy woodpecker, and that's a female.
Oh, there she goes.
She did not have the red on her head, but the males do. And of course, they're getting ready to nest if they haven't already here in springtime. It's a great time to get outdoors.
We're
and
looking
explore.
at a red one with a black head and a red neck. What is that?
Well, today's the first day I've seen that. The rose-breasted grosbeak. They're migrating up from South America.
Wow.
Just probably one of the most gorgeous spring birds in Illinois.
So we just got lucky, right? We just happened to be here the first day that they show up.
Well, I think you're probably the lucky charm, Mark.
You think it's me, huh? That'd be the first.
We also have a cardinal out there, a blue jay, some goldfinches. Right now
man.
these birds are just bursting with color as they get into their mating plumage.
Yeah.
Look
This
at
is
that
terrific.
on one there. You can really get a
Yeah,
view.
good look at him with his rose-colored chest. And when you come out and look at the birds through the nature window here, you'll also have a chance to see this Macon County History exhibit, but only until May 31st. With another Illinois story, I'm Mark McDonald in Decatur. Thanks for watching.
Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Illinois Arts Council Agency, and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you. For a DVD copy of the program you've just seen, send 1995 to P.O. Box 6248, Springfield, Illinois 62708. Be sure to include the program name, subject, and when the program aired. You can also order with your credit card by calling 800-232-3605.